My name is Susan Charters, and I'm speaking as a member of Storytelling Aurelia. We are grateful to have been able to record these stories of Mnjikaning, told by Elder Mark Douglas, on the traditional lands of the Chippewas of Rama First Nation, knowing that this place has been here since before our creation as human beings. We know that all beings, plants, and animals are our elders upon this earth, and that we, the youngest visitors, must ensure that the earth is here for the future generations of all beings that live upon her. We are grateful that the Creator has given us the opportunity to live peacefully upon this earth. I am sitting not far from the place of Mnjikaning, the fish fence, knowing that this place once was honored across Turtle Island and has a story thousands of years old that was almost lost. The fish have never forgotten and still gather at this place as they were asked to do at the time of creation. But for the rest of us, the story was almost forgotten. It should be inconceivable that this story was silenced, but it was, as the Ojibwe people faced hardship, assimilation, loss of their territory, language, culture, and history. So we are very grateful to Elder Mark Douglas of the Chippewas of Rama First Nation, who carries this story for the people of Mnjikaning, and in a spirit of great kindness and generosity is willing to share it. Mark recorded these stories at the Cultural Department in Rama, speaking to a small audience for an online Storytelling Aurelia event in March 2022. The English translation for the Ojibwe title is Lost, Forgotten, and Found. The Ojibwe title was given to us by teacher, storyteller, and musician Faye McKenzie as we marked a World Storytelling Day that had as its theme, Lost and Forgotten. Before Mark's stories, I need to give you a small bit of the history and geography mentioned in them. The Narrows, where the fish fences were built, lie between Lake Simcoe and Lake Couchiching, Ontario. Aurelia, about an hour and a half north of Toronto, is situated northwest of the Narrows. Rama is located across from Aurelia on the eastern side of Lake Couchiching. You'll hear Mark describing how far the weirs extended from the Narrows. About a quarter mile in each direction along the shores, he told me once. And the Narrows were so full of weirs at one time that boats could not pass through. Mark mentions the Coldwater Narrows Reserve, a first reserve of its kind in the country, according to Elder Jeff Maneg. The Ojibwe of the Lake Simcoe and Couchiching watersheds were forced to move onto this reserve around 1830. The reserve was about 14 miles long and 1.5 miles wide and ran from Lake Couchiching to Matchedash Bay on Lake Huron, along an ancient portage route that roughly followed what is now Coldwater Road in Aurelia and west on Highway 12. Settlers arrived in 1832 and wanted the land. In 1833, a side-wheeling steamer plowed through the weirs at the Narrows to bring settlers to the foot of Coldwater Road to take the portage route to Georgian Bay. Mark describes how when the reserve was dissolved a few years later, the Ojibwe were moved off in three directions, becoming the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation, the Beausoleil First Nation, and those who had to buy poor land and move to Rama on the other side of Lake Couchiching in 1836, becoming the Chippewas of Rama First Nation. A settlement and compensation for the reserve lands was not achieved until 2012. Now Mark, you will learn, is a master storyteller. He has a long career in the social service sector and is a respected elder in the Chippewas of Rama First Nation, living in the house he grew up in, with a view down Lake Couchiching to the Narrows. He has been given the Civitas Award by Lakehead University for his work bringing Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities together, and has been a member of Storytelling Aurelia since it began in 2012. He is active in many communities and has never hesitated to give wisdom and teaching to those who ask for it. He is a founding member of the Mnjikaning Fish Fence Circle, which formed in 1993 to protect remaining weirs during the reconstruction of a bridge on Highway 12 over the Narrows, at a time when the people of Rama were rediscovering their role as the keepers of Mnjikaning. Mark has been sharing the story since that time. Much of what Storytelling Aurelia members understand about Ojibwe culture has come to us from Mark and his wife Christine Douglas, who has been as wise and welcoming as Mark. We treasure Mark and are very grateful that he has agreed to tell these stories again. With thanks to Mark, Faye, we thank you all for listening. Storytelling Aurelia is made up of storytellers, and we believe in the spoken word, the power to draw people together and to heal through stories that change how we think and believe. We think the story of Mnjikaning needs to be heard again in this region, in this province, in the country, and across Turtle Island. Miigwech, 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 miigwech.
To greet you in our traditional way, my father's language, to say bonjour. Our community also says anin. It's an informal how. Anina is how, and it's a way of saying, I guess the cowboy movies of old had an influence in our little village here. And to tell you that my Indian name is Cloud Approaching, Badanquat Mnjikaning, and that I come from this beautiful community, Rama, but it's also known as Mnjikaning, which is the place of the fish fence. And to tell you that I'm of the Loon clan, Mong Dodem. So Bojo, Badanquat Mnjikaning, Mnjikaning and Donjaba, Mong Dodem. And to tell you that when I was younger, perhaps 8, my father fished a great deal. We had a small boat and he had a big boat, but the small boat. And the two of us, he would go along the shoreline casting inland, and I would still fish at the back of the boat. The depth of water would change because we weren't that too far from shore. And I loved jumbo perch, and that's what I was still fishing for. And my father would be fishing for bass or pike and the bigger fish. And this one time we went all the way down to the Narrows. And while we were there, a big launch from the Harris boat livery was anchored there. And the licensed guide, Renson Ingersoll, was also from my village, and he worked for Mansell Harris, and he was waiting for his party to come up from Toronto to take them fishing out in Lake Couchiching and Lake Simcoe. And so he and my father began talking in the language, and I was able to grasp little parts and pieces because I was encouraged not to learn the language. I was told you didn't need that old stuff. You needed a good education, you'd get a good job, and life would be hunky-dory. That was the word, hunky-dory. I was wondering what hunky-dory meant, but it seemed like an awesome, nice place to go to or to have. And Renson began talking about the Narrows and how his family had a place not too far from there. And he pointed, and that's where they would go for the summertime. When I was small, our family, we traveled up to Port Carling, and there was a fishing village there, and that's where about a third of our village would relocate to Port Carling when I was small, and caravan and trucks and cars and blown tires because of the rocky road all the way up there, and people helping one another along the way. And at Port Carling, the men would gain employment by, they built gazebos, docks, shoreline restoration, fishing guides. They just got opportunities that they didn't have down this way. And again, when I was small, we didn't always have a lot to eat. So that's why my father fished, and that supplemented what we did have. But Renson talked about this powerful place at the Narrows, and I was trying to understand powerful place, a beautiful place, and trying to understand it all. I later caught up with Renson as I was growing older, teenager and such, and I would ask him more questions about the Narrows. And he would tell me about wintertime in the village. And people, before the fridges and freezers and the technology at the time, this is 67 years ago, so the technology 67 years ago, we still had ice boxes and such, but the fridges and the freezers were just almost here, but not quite here yet. So they would dig a hole in the ground, and they would catch different things, everything from roast beef, pork, venison, moose, fish. Everything would go in this in the ground, and it would be covered over, and that would freeze. And then in the wintertime, you'd go and just dig out a little bit. They kept taking little bits of food out to feed everybody that had gathered in the house. And I guess we had credit, but eventually our credit would reach a limit, and then the stores in town would not offer us any more credit. And so the meat markets and the different shops, Battalias was one of the only ones that would still extend us credit. So there was always a love for Battalias because of their kindness. We didn't have the money, we didn't have too much, but they had always let us, what we call, run our face. And that was an expression of borrowing, and I'll pay you later. So you ran your face, you had to strmile and act sincere, and they'd extend a bit of credit. But after a long, tough winter, we're hunkered down in our little places, wiki-ups and such. You caught the odd snowshoe rabbit by snare, or the odd squirrel that might have come out of hibernation. And you'd throw that in the soup pot and try and make ends meet, but it was the same soup pot boiling away on the stove, and you just kept adding more things into it, whether it was some turnip or, and a potato or two, but throw a rabbit in, throw a squirrel in, throw some fish in. So it was a real hodgepodge mixture. And you eat that, half of January, all of February, and now halfway through March, and it's the same food over and over and over again. And we didn't have a lot of spice and such. We didn't have a lot of salt and pepper and the things that we have today. And it was tiring, I guess. The same meal over and over and over again, but that's what we had for breakfast, that's what we had for lunch, that's what we had for supper, and you always had a little bit before you went to bed. So it was the same meal over and over and over again, and it gets tiring. And our bodies tend to shift during this winter time too, because we're not getting the fresh foods and the nutrients and the vitamins and things that our bodies rely on. And we'd be eating that same food. So when it came chance mid-March to begin getting ready, mid-February to begin getting ready to head down to the Narrows, and people would be getting ready from Owen Sound, Sutton, Newmarket, Peterborough, Perry Sound, Georgian Bay. They come from a long ways, and they'd begin their journey to the Narrows. And it's one of the largest fishing villages that was created. The amount of pieces of fish fence, there's 2 pieces here, they've been carbon dated by experts and measured and such, but some of them are 5,000 years old, these pieces of wood. And sometimes something only 3,000 years old is right beside something that's 5,000 years old. That's also beside something that's only 200 years old. And you wonder why. And I guess the ice at times would take some of the fence out. So you only replaced what was broken. You didn't rip down your whole fence and put in a nice new one like we do today. It's all got to match and look like it was recently acquired anyways. But you only hammered in the pieces that were missing. And so something old would be right beside something very new or newer. And this is how they would trap and catch their fish. But upwards of 400 families living at Atherley. And it's one of the places there where the A&W is now, and the gas bar in behind there is called Orchard Point. And wondered why it's an orchard. There were a couple of apple trees, but that's not what you would call an orchard. It was the massive oak trees and the massive amount of acorns that would fall to the ground. And they would boil up these acorns over and over and over again, maybe 3 times a boil, and take some of the tannin out of the nut. And they'd pulverize what was left in the acorn, and they'd mix it with an equal amount of dried fish and mix it together. And apparently it's like a power bar, and that's all you need to reach in and have a handful, and it had all the nutrients that your body relied on to move about. And so that would be happening. That's why it's known as an orchard. But that's where one of our camps were. But we were camped all in and around the Narrows, pre the development that's taken place today with all the homes and the businesses and such, the busyness of the Narrows. But people would be camped all the way around. It went as far up as the Hammock and a fair ways down into Lake Simcoe. And there's pieces of wooden fish fence that's throughout that whole area. For us here in Rama, it would only take us, half a day to get our stuff together and get down there and build a new camp, and so that we would stay for perhaps 4 weeks to 8 weeks. We'd be there for the half of March and all of April and part of May. The different species of fish come through at different times. And I love jumbo perch. I always have. And I guess perch at one time in this lake were like this. Now they're only little guys, and you have to catch an awful lot of little guys in order to have a good meal of perch. But back then you only needed, 2 or 3 big perch, and it would be a feast. Which reminds me of another story. There was a store here in Rama, and Phoebe Snake and Norman ran this store. And I was sent to that store. Again, I was perhaps 6 or 7, and I had a note, and I was to get 2 cans of carnation milk, and that's what we would put in our tea or put a little on our cereal or porridge. And I wasn't allowed to carry anything else. It would break, I guess, or disappear. You'd have a trail of flour all the way to my house, or a trail of sugar. But 2 tins of milk I was allowed to carry in a little paper bag. So I had to go to the store with my note, and again on credit, to get 2 tins of carnation milk from Contented Cows. And there were some men in the store, and there was a potbelly stove, and the men were all around there. And I listened to this one man while I was waiting for my order, and one man said, "Oh, I was out fishing." It was wintertime, and I was out fishing, and he says, "I caught 3 beautiful fish. Oh, man." Went home, and my wife, we had a feast. It was so good. The next man over said, "You call yourself a fisherman?" "Well, I went out and I caught 6 fish like that. And we invited the neighbors next door. And they came over, and we had a heck of a fish fry." And goes to the next guy, and he says, "Well, I caught 9 fish like that. And I invited this neighbor, and I invited that neighbor, and they all came over, and we had a fish fry, and man, was it ever good." Anyways, they were going around, and there was more fish, and one guy, he fed the whole neighborhood. He had the whole neighborhood come over, and they had a big fish fry and talk, and everybody full and laying around telling stories, and finally comes around to this one young man. It was Scotty Simcoe. And Scotty said, "Well, I was out fishing, and I caught fish about this big." And they all laughed at him, and they were teasing him. "You call yourself a fisherman for catching a fish like that?" And he said, "Well, Scotty," and they were giving him grief, and he says, "Yeah, but I had nothing to measure it with." So that was the distance between the eyes. And the laughter that went on, and these 8 men. But to have a long, tough winter, and you're eating the last year dried meats, the last year dried vegetables, the last year dried fish, and your body's screaming for fresh food. And the fresh food is, the first one available is at the Narrows, where with your fence you were able to trap fish, and you caught that fish. My grandmother, when I was small, would make fish head soup. And the eyeballs would float to the top. They'd pop out of the skulls of the fish, and they'd be floating on top of your soup bowl. And she would listen to make sure that she heard crunch as you crunched an eyeball, like a grape. And I guess that eyeball has all the nutrients and all the vitamins and all the minerals that your body needs. And it's like kick-starting your whole system, having gone without all of those things during the winter time. And yeah, it did taste like eyeballs. And I'm lucky that I've grown older now, and I don't really have an appreciation for eyeball soup anymore, but I do remember having to eat it, and my grandmother listening to make sure that I did eat it and didn't spit it out. And those were the times. The fish life is very sensitive. You know, especially I hunted from shore with a spear an awful lot of times, and if you bang something accidentally, everything scatters, and nothing's there by the time you get to the water's edge. So you literally have to sneak up on them and think kindly of the fish. But it was part of the belief system that if her and we haven't been getting along. She said something about me and my family a while ago, and I haven't quite forgiven her for that, and I would be carrying resentment. And if we both went to the Narrows, and I saw you, and I'd go "Arr," back at you for what you said to me, the whole village would see us being unkind to each other and would ask both of us to leave. Because the belief was, with that negativity, was enough to keep the fish life away. And we would both have to leave, and hopefully go up the road and agree to shake hands and put aside whatever was troubling us, and they'd let us back into camp, because we really did need that fish life to keep on living and to have that fish. But the drying racks and we smoked our fish and air dried our fish, and everybody that came, it said they took some home with them. But 400 families is a lot of families coming in from all over the region and forming a humongous camp. And at that camp would be, in the evening times, would be the storytelling times, and new recipes and new medicines were discovered, and women sharing and men sharing, and the old ones looked after the little ones, and it was just a powerful, powerful gathering place. And you had to be on your best behavior. You had to be in a good frame of mind and a good attitude in order to encourage the fish life to come into your community. But thousands and thousands and thousands of fish would come through. But you couldn't have them all. You could have 2/3, you could have half, but you couldn't take them all, because if you took them all, you annihilate that particular species, and within 8 years, that species is no longer here. And so even our people knew that, and so they would pull a couple of the fish fence pieces out on the Couchiching side of their fence to allow the fish to go through, because they were going to go up into the shallower water from the deeper water of Simcoe and to spawn and have their babies, find their mate and have their babies. And you had to allow some of them through so that they could do that work. And it was just a busy, busy place. It's one of the first trading posts is set up right beside our village, where those big condominiums, 2 big condominiums have gone up. That was one of our fishing villages at the time. The surveyor wouldn't walk the property because the Indians were camped there, and he was afraid of being, I don't know what he was afraid of, but he wouldn't go into the camp. He stayed all around the periphery of the camp. He wouldn't go there. But one of the first reservations that was set up went between the Narrows and Coldwater Festerton. So it said that we had a mile of shoreline on Georgian Bay, a mile of shoreline on Couch, and a mile of shoreline on Simcoe. And we had Bass Lake and other rivers and creeks, and all the way over to Coldwater Festerton. And it was just, they were gathering us there to teach us farming, and so that we wouldn't have to chase our food all the time. We could grow food, and it would be right by the door. And we could harvest and enjoy the farm life. But every time we're on a roll and planting things, somebody'd say, "Let's go hunting." And all the men would take off and go hunting, or they'd go fishing, or they'd go out and about, and for their walkabouts, and abandon their farms. And a petition went through this region. 50 prominent Anglicans. I can only call them Anglicans because they were all Anglicans. They petitioned the government to move us away so that they could have this operation, this farming operation. We'd cleared the land, massive trees. You can imagine the size, the trees that were here. And one team of oxen to pull the stumps out. So we made all that farmland, built a couple of grist mills to pulverize our grain into flour, and we were learning. But every time we had a chance, we ran away fishing to go with the farming, because we still love fish and still love to hunt and chase our game, I guess, a little bit. Renson would tell me, Renson Ingersoll, an elder in our community, was a harvester, a trapper, a licensed fishing guide. There were about maybe a dozen men in my village that wore badges from the Ontario government, from M&R, and they were certified licensed guides, and they were able to take parties out on the lake, and they'd catch fish and go to an island and make fire, and the cooks would cook up the fish that they caught, and with some potatoes and pork and beans. And my job was, when my dad took parties out, I had to clean the fish when they hit the shore, and because people would be driving back to Toronto and want to take their clean fish back to Toronto with them, and for that I'd get a whole nickel, which was a lot of money at one time. The candy you could buy with a nickel. There is so many stories about the Narrows. Those are some of the things that I can remember learning about. It seemed when I got older and began asking people about the Narrows and the fish fence, it's as though people had gone to sleep in our village and forgot the story, even the little parts that each family knew. Because we would go there and relocate there like we did to Port Carling and create a fishing village, and we'd live there for, as I say, 6 to 8 weeks, and then venture home. There were other harvesting sites. They were maple sugar bushes, and then the berry season's not too far beyond the fishing season, and strawberries and raspberries and blueberries and cranberries later in the year. These were all things that we would gather. Renson, my father had been wounded in the Second World War, and Renson would always bring us muskrat and beaver, so we always had some type of meat, so we didn't always go too hungry, and mixed with, we ate fish 5 times a week, but we would have other foods to blend in. He'd bring us leeks, he'd bring us all kinds of things that he would find in the bush. He really knew bush life, swamp life, hardwood life, softwood life. He knew the land beyond our borders, and I couldn't keep up with him in the bush. He would travel so fast. He could hop over stumps and logs, and I'm still crawling over, and he's way up there, and I'd try and run, catch up. I got left in the bush a couple of times having to walk home because I lost him. He'd get away on me. He traveled so fast. But he was a beautiful man, and he would tease me all the time when I was little. And one of the things he used to tease me about was we're the smartest Indians going. You know that, eh? And I was agree, yes, we are. He'd say, you know how come? And, well, we invented the toboggan. No, that's not it. And then he'd tease me again. Do you know how come we're so smart? We had the snowshoe? No, that's not it. We had the birch bark canoe. That's got to be it. No, that's not it. And he would do this. And this went on for almost like 6 or 7 years. And I'm finally about 9. And I finally say to him, I admit I don't know why we're the smartest Indians going. And he'd say, it's real simple. At Flora Park, it's where the Red Rock begins. And there's a life on the Red Rock. That's where the that's where the black fly and the pine tree and the moose and the blueberry reside. And on this side of that Red Rock is the White Rock, where the limestone is. That's where the deer and the maple tree and the mosquito and the strawberry live. And they're 2 different worlds, the medicine world, the food world, and we knew both because we could live here and travel here easily, or we could literally go up into the Muskokas and knew how to live off the land there and trap and harvest and catch. And that's why we were so smart, because we knew both worlds. And not every First Nation person has the opportunity to know both worlds. They only have the one world that surrounds their village. And he would tease me over and over again about why we're so smart and do you know how come? And I didn't know. I would guess, but he finally taught me. And he was a beautiful man. I missed him dearly when he passed. He wasn't understood in this village because he was from the old ways, I guess, and the new ways were seen as a better way. And there's so much to tell. I'm not sure what I've left out.
I don't think you talked about why were the fish in the Narrows and when? What time of year?
Yeah, I did.
March,
You did?
Time of year.
mid-March. So they're beginning to gather now. They're getting ready. They're on the Simcoe side. They're in the deep water. And they're ready to come up into Couchiching, which is much shallower and known as the spawning beds of all the fish species. And, you know, the pickerel and the suckers and then the pike come through. The perch then come. Muskellunge are late June. The bass are early June. So each species of fish, it's like they have their own window when they go through at the Narrows. And they use the same spawning beds in this lake. And but they say the fish were so plentiful that you could walk across their backs and not get too wet. You could walk across the Narrows. But there was no bridge at that time. You would fashion a raft of some kind or a canoe of some kind to get across. And people would leave canoes there so you could scoot across. But what else?
What about the gather, like you hear about weddings and things happening other than fishing at the Narrows? What do you know about that?
Well, when the government wanted to meet with us, they would attend a place like the Narrows, and they'd have a formal table with white cloth and such, and they'd all sit. Of course, we'd all stand or sit on the ground. They would sit in their chairs, and lots of good talk, lots of good powwow. But they were hungry to acquire the land from us, and have us move. And 1846 is one of the big meetings they held at the Narrows, and they wanted us to move to Manitoulin Island because we were complaining about the encroachment and I don't know, the negativity that was being shown to us, the drinking and such. So they told us to move away and get away from it all. And only a handful of people actually listened to them and moved. They came back to Rama a few years later, but because they really didn't like living up that way. I guess they missed their friends and family down this way.
While you're speaking of that, so you were owed money for the land that they confiscated. You had to buy the land here in Rama. Could you talk a bit about that history, like when you were moved from that first reserve?
In 1834, we got run out of the city of Aurelia, and the properties that we acquired that went between the Narrows and Coldwater-Fesserton. We were marched out of town. Bosley Island, went to Bosley Island, and then later moved to Charity, which they then changed to Christian. It was Faith, Hope, and Charity that they moved to. That's the three islands they had. And Georgina went down to Snake, Fox, and Georgina Island. And we went to Chief Island for a while they were negotiating and buying the land. And in 1836, we moved to this village on land that hadn't been given off to the, you had to, a certain rank received X amount of acres, and you had to clear X amount, there was conditions. You had to clear so much land, and you were eventually forgiven the mortgage or the price of the land. But we weren't able to own anything. We buy land in Rama Township, and pretty soon we're children and not able to own anything. And so it's all taken away from us. It's just the way it was back then. They didn't, they say the Anglicans wanted a meeting place for their Sunday gatherings. So Yellowhead loaned them his lodge. And pretty soon they were thanking him for the gift of the lodge. And he was going, did I give it to them or did I lend it to them? Did I give it to them or did I lend it to them? And he got mixed up and walked away, letting them have that place, which is still their church and such. He's buried there. They say he was dug up and relocated, but that's not our story. That's someone else's story. He's under the street now. Cars are running over him.
Can you tell us the story of Toronto?
Toronto. The Haudenosaunee people, the Iroquois, we didn't always get along with them. But anyways, they're on a canoe, and they're in Lake Ontario, and they go by what's City Hall, CN Tower, and the C&E grounds, and they're going west, and they come to a large bay, and it's the Humber River. And when they get into that bay, they point and go, Toronto, Toronto, Toronto. In their way, it meant if you take this watershed from here, take you 3 days, it'll take you to the place where many, many trees are standing in the water. And Toronto means the many, many trees that are standing in the water. And that's the Narrows. That's here. That's not down there. Down there was known as the carrying place. They had small creeks and rivers to get your canoe around, but you wound up walking and carrying everything a lot more than leaving it in the canoe and moving it around by barge or canoe. think I told that right. Did I leave anything out? But when I was little, people had forgotten that we were at one time camped at the Narrows. They forgot all about it because the pressure to forget all that stuff and get a education, get a good job, and life would be hunky-dory. Did all that and still wondered about the Narrows and the stories. And it's true, the Huron, Wendat people fished there as well. But they were only in this region. They left 350 years ago after their fight with their cousins. And they were only here for, they say, a couple hundred years. And we lived with them, around them, ahead of them, after them, beside them. We traded with them. We got along well with them, but we would not engage in their war with them when they were fighting their cousins. And then the Iroquois thought they owned everything because they'd beat the Huron, so then we had to fight to ensure that we were able to remain stewards of the land here. And there are peace treaty belts from the conflicts that we had with them. There is, in this room, or in this building, a story about Yellowhead's wampum belt. And it describes a line that comes from Sault Ste. Marie and it comes down to Manitoulin Island. And there's a big whitefish watching over that fire at Manitoulin Island. And then there's one on, is it Beaver Island? Or it's a brown bear that's at Penetang. And there's what animal's over that one? And then at Mnjikaning is a big white reindeer standing over the Narrows. And anything white is significant, like a white buffalo, a white bear. It's with awe, and it's a sign that the creators made it special. And this is where the sun was hung in the middle of the Ojibwe world, and it was hung at the Narrows. So the sun and the white reindeer are two symbols that my community use, and that's from ancient times. And Teresa Desormeaux, that designed it, dreamed it. She dreamed it, and she worked with two elders, Harvey and Leland, and they helped her understand her dream, and that became our flag of our nation. She's one of our artists in our community, and it's so real. It's based on truth. And then there's another camp, and that's at the New Credit, and a big eagle sits in a pine tree watching over that fire. So they have animals watching over fires, fish, deer, and an eagle. But it doesn't say what's at the Sioux other than a fire. They don't say which animal is there. But Bawatang is also where many fish gather and travel through the river system. And any other?
I don't think today you've talked about how the trees were harvested to be built into the, and I've heard you tell that before.
Well, we had chainsaws, and we had axes, and we had saws. This is prior to all of that time, and what we had was a stone axe and fire. And to go and pray to a tree and ask it to give up its life in that form and to come with you to the Narrows to take on a new life. and you did your best to limit, sharpen it. The current at the Narrows prior to the lift lock, before the lock system went in place, the current was quite strong. So a man in a canoe would take the canoe out and would have to try and hold the canoe in one place rather than the current pushing it north into Couchiching. He had to really paddle hard just to stay in the one place. The second guy in the canoe would take the raw log out that they had just prepared and slide it over the side of the canoe. And the third person in the canoe would use a flat rock and would pound the top of a stake into the mucky bottom, and that's what would form the basis of your fence, which allowed where the fish would get bump into, and then they had heart-shaped ones, round ones, square ones, full line ones with just a small opening in a fence where the fish would come through. They speared them and netted them, and even a weaved basket with a wider weave and some rocks, and you sink the basket, and you see a fish, and then you pull the basket up, and the basket would bring the fish up. So they had different ways of bringing the fish up. Today, with all the technology of rods and fiberglass fishing rods, and those are today's, and the chainsaw and the axe are all today. Back then, we didn't have the steel, and we didn't have, we had more rustic tools, but I guess they worked. But it would maybe take you 2 hours to wrestle a tree out of the bush, praying and trying not to swear. Come on, tree, come with me. I need you, to take it to the Narrows. And
Is it a certain type of wood?
the different species of wood, everything from birch to poplar to cedar to once a wood is immersed in water and is kept there, it'll hold its integrity as wood. It's when it comes into the air dries all the wood out, and it turns punky and falls apart. A conservator from Ganawaki worked for Parks Canada, and she took every molecule of water out of a piece of fence, literally by using a needle, a hypodermic needle, and replacing it with like a crayon waxy material, injecting to hold the integrity of the wood together. So I met her. She was quite pleased with the work. She invented the method, I guess, of taking the water out and replacing it. And so the fish fence group has a set. The community here has a set, and the museum has a set, and the community between the fish fence group and the community, one of us are loaning our set to Muskoka Center and the museum that they're redoing, and they want to show the fish fence, so we're offering them a couple of pieces.
I have something else I'd like to. Can I ask if you would speak about how the community refound the name Mnjikaning?
Fred Wheatley was a beautiful older man from Waksoxing, and he, again, like Renson, he would tease us, "I know your true Indian name," and we're all hungry to know what our Indian name was. And Merle Assance Beatty told the story of her father. That's written on part of the story, wherever the story wherever the story.
Behind you. There.
Oh, Mnjikaning story in her father's language, her language, is in the center there, and but the elders came and told us that we're known as the people of Mnjikaning, and some people felt quite insulted because it literally translates to fish fence farmer, and they didn't want to be farmers. We just bought 8 farms, and we don't want to be farmers? Okay, I'll try and understand. And it's just, what's in the name?
I
But,
thought Sherry had something to do with recovering the name. No?
Came from Merle.
Merle.
Auntie Merle and Uncle Fred.
Okay.
There were supposed to be 2 other elders coming to tell us the story, but they somehow didn't make it. And but our former chief, Norm Stinson, always felt they were teasing him when they said he was from Mnjikaning, and felt insulted. I don't know why, but that's the way he tells it, and thought he was being teased and laughed at.
If you're literally translating Mnjikaning, it means at the fence. But Arnold says if you say Mnjikaning, that means the place of the fish fences. So I don't know where they added farmer in there. Doesn't say Gitagun, which is farm. Hard to know, but it's a beautiful name and her story.
And when would that have been that you found that the elders told you the name again? Norm Stinson.
George changed the bus. It said Rama school bus, and all of a sudden it said Mnjikaning school bus. Was that 20 years ago?
Yeah.
20 years ago. And then the elders went. Did I ever get beaten up? Church elders. Yeah, they. How dare you want to call it Mnjikaning? We've been Rama all our lives. Rama, Bill Allen searches Rama and finds that it's from a very old text of the Bible, and it foretells of a king feeling so threatened by the birth of this little prince that he promises he will kill every boy child 2 and under, and that's the prophecy of Rama.
Whoops.
And Mnjikaning is a place where you go and everybody that leaves gets fish to go home with. Whether you helped a little bit or helped big time, you got the same amount as everybody else. And I prefer Mnjikaning when
And while you were there, everything was hunky-dory, because there were ceremonies every night. And as you asked, weddings, births, naming ceremonies, dances, drumming, singing, everything. It's a beautiful,
Beautiful. Yeah.
hunky-dory time.
but we got run out of town. We moved here. Friday nights, the stores would stay late, and the men would have their check to cash and clothes and groceries to buy. But the stores closed at 9, but the police started rounding you up at 8 to tell you to start heading home to Rama because you wouldn't want to stay in town overnight in the Hoosgow. And they would stick them with their billy clubs, and they hurt. That's their job, was to get rid of the Indians. They weren't allowed to stay in town overnight. That's how it was when I was little. A little more tolerance now for us, so
A little bit.
there's still people that say nasty things about us, so it's hard. Not looking Aboriginal, I've heard them all. Sing us a song, Faye.
Okay. The song is called The Four Directions. And in Anishinaabe culture, we're always looking towards the next 7 generations. And this song is thanking our ancestors in the 4 directions for everything that they left for us to pick up along the trail and for us to prepare for the next 7 generations. And the first verse is thanking the grandfathers, then the grandmothers, and then the truth that they left for us. So I have to sing it 4 times, once for each direction. And then I'll have to I'll play some honor beats at the end of it in case your spirit decides to go off into one of those 4 directions. Those honor beats will call you back.